Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Cassidy pressed the steam iron against the delicate silk, watching the fabric smooth under the heat. Each movement was deliberate, precise. 32 years of life had taught her that perfection was the only currency that mattered in a world that constantly tried to shortchange her. The sewing room in her modest Oregon house was her sanctuary. Bolts of fabric lined the walls in careful order: ivory silks, midnight velvets, champagne satins. Her grandmother's antique Singer machine sat in the corner, though Cassidy preferred hand-stitching for her most important pieces. The machine work was for alterations and quick fixes. The real artistry happened with needle and thread, one stitch at a time. "Cass, you in there?" Her father's voice drifted through the door. "Working, Dad." She didn't look up from the beadwork she was attaching to the bodice. Each crystal had to be placed exactly right. One wrong move, and she'd have to start the entire panel over. Harlan Rowe pushed open the door, his weathered hands gripping a cup of coffee. Retirement hadn't been kind to him. After 40 years as a machinist, his hands still moved like they were operating equipment, but his eyes held the emptiness of a man with too much time and too many memories. That for the Henderson girl's wedding. Marley's dress. Cassidy finally looked up, blinking away the strain from the close work. "She's getting married in 3 months. Harlan's expression tightened. He'd never hidden his feelings about Marley, though he'd never openly criticized her either. That wasn't his way. He saved his disapproval for pursed lips and meaningful silences. "You sure about this, kiddo?" Making her dress. Cassidy set down her needle and stretched her back. "She's my sister." "Half-sister," Harlan corrected quietly. "And she's never done right by you." The statement hung between them. They both knew it was true. Marley had been the golden child from the moment she was born. 5 years after their mother had decided small-town life wasn't enough for her. Eleanor Rowe had left on a Tuesday morning when Cassidy was 7, and returned 6 months later pregnant with another man's child, begging forgiveness. Harlan had forgiven her. Cassidy never had. "This dress will be perfect," Cassidy said, returning to her work. "When people see it, they'll know what I can do. And if they don't, they will." Her voice carried a certainty that made Harlan step back. He recognized that tone. It was the same one she'd used when she decided to teach herself advanced embroidery techniques, the same one she'd used when she'd turned down a full scholarship to fashion school in New York because she couldn't leave him alone with Eleanor and baby Marley. "I'm making coffee. You want some?" "In a bit." Cassidy was already lost again in her work, fingers moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who had found her calling early and never wavered. Harlan lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching his eldest daughter work. She'd been the steady one, the responsible one, the one who stayed. And somehow that had made her invisible to everyone except him. The phone rang downstairs, and he heard the familiar sound of Marley's voice on the answering machine. Even through the tinny speaker, she managed to sound breathless and dramatic. "Cass, I need to come over and talk about the dress. I have so many ideas. Call me back." Cassidy's hands paused for just a second before continuing their precise movements. She'd learned long ago that Marley's ideas usually meant changes, complications, and demands that would triple the work involved. But this dress would be different. This dress would prove something. 3 hours later, Marley swept into the house without knocking, her arms full of bridal magazines and fabric samples. At 27, she still moved through the world like it existed solely for her entertainment. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the February drizzle outside. "Cass, I'm here. Where's my dress?" Cassidy emerged from the sewing room, wiping her hands on a towel. "It's not ready to see yet." "But I brought all these ideas." Marley dumped the magazines on the kitchen table, scattering pages everywhere. "Look at this neckline. And this train. Oh, And Chase's mother saw this dress in Portland and said it was exactly what a bride should wear. She flipped through pages frantically, pointing at gowns that cost more than most people's cars. Each one was more elaborate than the last, dripping with crystals and layers of imported lace. Marley, we already discussed the design. I've been working on it for 3 months. But these are so much better. Can't you just start over? You have 3 more months. Cassidy took a slow breath. No. Why not? It's not like you have anything else to do. The words hit like a slap, but Cassidy's expression didn't change. She'd learned to absorb these casual cruelties without flinching. It was a skill she'd perfected over 2 decades of living with Marley. The dress I'm making will be beautiful. Trust me. Marley pouted, expression that had gotten her everything she wanted since childhood. But Chase's family has money, Cass. Real money. I need to look like I belong with them. You will. Can I at least see what you've done so far? When it's finished. Marley's pout deepened into genuine irritation. She wasn't used to being denied anything, especially by Cassidy. Fine, but it better be amazing. Chase's mother is flying in from Portland, and she's very particular about these things. She gathered up her magazines with exaggerated huffiness. I'm having lunch with Chase. We're looking at venues in Portland. Real venues, not the community center. After Marley left, Cassidy returned to her sewing room and locked the door. She pulled a sheet off the dress form in the corner, revealing 6 months of work. The gown was a masterpiece. Hand-sewn French seams, silk-covered buttons that had taken her 2 weeks to perfect. Beadwork that caught the light like captured starlight. The neckline was elegant without being revealing, the train long enough to be impressive without being impractical. Every stitch was perfect at IT, was also exactly what Marley had originally asked for, before the magazines and the pressure from Chase's family had started changing her mind. Cassidy ran her fingers along the silk, feeling the hours of work beneath her touch. This dress represented everything she was capable of. It was worth more than anything Marley could buy in Portland. But Marley would never understand that. She covered the dress again and returned to work on the final details. The wedding was still 3 months away, but she wanted everything perfect. She needed it to be perfect. The memory hit Cassidy while she was hand-sewing the final hem. She was 16 again, standing in the kitchen at 5 a.m., flour dusting her apron as she put the finishing touches on 3 dozen cupcakes for the school fundraiser. She'd spent her own babysitting money on the ingredients. Stayed up half the night perfecting the buttercream roses. They were beautiful, worthy of a professional bakery. When she arrived at school, exhausted but proud, she found Marley holding court near the bake sale table, accepting compliments from teachers and parents. "Oh, these? I made them myself," 11-year-old Marley had said, beaming. "I've been baking since I was little." Cassidy had stood frozen, watching her sister take credit for hours of work. When she finally approached, Marley had smiled sweetly and said, "Thanks for helping, Cass. You're such a good assistant." The memory faded, but the anger remained. It was a familiar weight in her chest, something she'd carried for so long it felt like part of her anatomy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marley. "At the venue! It's amazing. Can't wait for you to see where your dress will be." Cassidy set the phone aside without responding. She'd learned long ago that Marley's excitement was always temporary, always focused on the next shiny thing that caught her attention. She thought about the prom dress incident from senior year. Cassidy had been working extra shifts at the local diner to save money for a dress, something simple but elegant that she'd planned to alter herself. She'd even had a date, Ryan Morrison, who'd asked her to prom after months of shy conversations in English class 2 weeks before prom. Marley had somehow convinced Ryan that Cassidy wasn't really interested in going. She'd also spread rumors that Cassidy was planning to wear a weird homemade dress that would embarrass him. Ryan had awkwardly uninvited Cassidy and asked Marley instead. Marley had worn a $100 dress their mother bought her and spent the night dancing with Cassidy's date while Cassidy worked a double shift at the diner. When confronted, Marley had shrugged. It's not my fault he liked me better. Maybe if you weren't so serious all the time, guys would notice you. Eleanor had sided with Marley, of course. Cassidy's just jealous. Marley can't help being popular. The pattern was always the same. Marley took what she wanted. Eleanor made excuses, and Cassidy absorbed the damage in silence. But this time would be different. This time Cassidy was in control. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through Marley's social media posts. Her sister documented every moment of her life with carefully curated photos and breathless captions. The engagement photos, the venue visits, the dress shopping trips to Portland boutiques. One post caught her attention. A photo of Marley and Chase at an expensive restaurant, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "Celebrating our venue deposit. Can't believe we're really doing this. Hashtag blessed, hashtag engaged, hashtag dream wedding." Cassidy studied Chase's face in the photo. He was handsome in a generic way, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that looked practiced. She'd met him a few times and found him charming but shallow, the kind of man who talked about his success in careful, rehearsed phrases. He was perfect for Marley. Her phone rang. Harlan's contact photo appeared on the screen. "Dad, you might want to come downstairs. Marley's here, and she's upset about something." Cassidy could hear crying in the background, the dramatic sobbing that Marley had perfected as a child. It usually meant she wanted something expensive or had gotten herself into trouble. "I'll be right down." She found Marley collapsed on a living room couch, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Harlan hovered nearby, looking uncomfortable. He'd never known how to handle Marley's emotional outbursts. "What's wrong?" Cassidy asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The venue wants the full payment up front," Marley sobbed. "Chase thought we could do it in installments, but they changed their minds. We need $8,000 by next week or we lose the deposit." Cassidy sat down across from her sister. "Don't you and Chase have savings?" "Some, but not enough. And his business is going through a rough patch. He says it's temporary, but—" She dissolved into fresh tears. "What do you want me to do about it?" Marley looked up, her eyes red but calculating. "Could you ask Dad for a loan? He'd listen to you." There it was, the real reason for the tears. Marley wanted Harlan's retirement money to fund her fantasy wedding. "Absolutely not. Please, Cass. It's my wedding. It's supposed to be the most important day of my life." "Then scale it back. Have the wedding at the community center like you originally planned." "I can't. Chase's family expects something elegant. His mother already sent invitations to all her friends in Portland. I'll be humiliated." Cassidy watched her sister cry and felt nothing but cold calculation. Marley had never worried about humiliating anyone else, but the moment her own reputation was at stake, she fell apart. "I'm not asking Dad for money," Cassidy said firmly. "Find another way." Marley's tears dried up instantly, replaced by the familiar flash of anger that appeared whenever she didn't get what she wanted. "Fine, be selfish, but don't expect me to be grateful for your stupid dress when my whole wedding is ruined." She stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Harlan appeared in the doorway, shaking his head. "She'll figure something out. She always does." "Yeah," Cassidy said quietly. "She always does." But this time, Cassidy was going to make sure the solution came with a price point 3 weeks before the wedding. Cassidy finally agreed to bring the dress to Marley's apartment for the final fitting. She'd finished every detail the night before the last bead, the final stitch in the hem, the delicate button loops that had taken her an entire afternoon to perfect. The dress was magnificent. Even she had to admit that. It was everything a wedding dress should be. Elegant, timeless, crafted with a level of skill that most brides could only dream of. The kind of dress that would be passed down through generations. She hung it carefully in the back of her car, protecting it with multiple garment bags. The drive to Marley's apartment took 20 minutes, but she drove slowly, avoiding every pothole and bump, Marley lived in a modern complex on the edge of town, the kind of place that charged extra for amenities like a fitness center and a pool that worked 3 months out of the year. Chase helped with the rent, though Cassidy suspected most of his contribution came from the business dealings that seemed to shift and change every time someone asked for specifics. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, dress in hand, and knocked on apartment 2B. "Coming." Marley's voice bright and excited. The door opened to reveal Marley in a silk robe, her hair in curlers. Behind her, Cassidy could see decorations scattered across the living room, wedding favors, centerpieces, and stacks of programs waiting to be assembled. "Oh my God, is that it? Is that my dress?" "It's finished," Cassidy said, stepping inside. "I can't wait to see it. Tessa's here. You remember Tessa, my maid of honor? She's been dying to see your work." Tessa Bloom emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand. She was one of Marley's college friends, the type of woman who spoke in exclamation points and treated every minor event like a celebration worthy of champagne. "Cassidy, I've heard so much about this dress. Marley says you're incredibly talented." "Let's see how it looks," Cassidy said, hanging the garment bag on the bedroom door. "Actually," Marley said, "can you hang it in the bedroom? I want to try it on privately first, make sure everything fits right. You understand." Cassidy felt a flicker of unease but nodded. She carried the dress into the bedroom and carefully removed it from the bag. In the afternoon light streaming through the windows, it looked even more beautiful than she remembered. "I'll be right back," Marley said, closing the bedroom door behind her. Cassidy stood alone with the dress for a moment, running her fingers along the silk one last time. Soon it would belong to Marley, would become part of her wedding day story. The thought should have made her proud, but instead she felt strangely empty. She opened the bedroom door to rejoin Marley and Tessa, but stopped when she heard their voices from the living room. They were talking about the dress. "So what do you really think?" Tessa was asking that. Marley's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Honestly, it's exactly what I expected from her. Very earnest, very Cassidy. Is it at least well made?" "Oh, I'm sure it's technically perfect. You know how she is about details. But it's so plain, Tessa. So boring. Nothing like what I really wanted." Cassidy pressed her back against the bedroom wall, heart pounding. "But she spent months on it," Tessa said. "I know, and I feel bad about that. But I found the most amazing dress in Portland last week. It's a real designer from a real boutique. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but Chase's mother insisted on paying for it. She said no daughter-in-law of hers was wearing something homemade to the wedding." "What are you going to do about Cassidy's dress?" "I'll figure something out. If she asks, tell her it doesn't fit, or that I spilled something on it. Honestly, it looks like something from a thrift store. I can't wear that walking down the aisle in front of Chase's family. They'd think we were complete hicks." Tessa giggled. "You're terrible, but I understand. This is your wedding. You should wear what makes you feel beautiful." "Exactly. And that dress, well, it's very sweet that she tried, but it's just not me. It's not what I need for this wedding." Cassidy stood frozen, every word hitting like a physical blow. 6 months of work. 6 months of perfect stitches and careful planning and sacrificed evenings. 6 months of pouring her heart and skill into something she thought would finally make Marley appreciate her. Something from a thrift store. The rage that filled her was cold and clean, burning away the hurt and leaving something harder behind. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her expression, and walked back into the bedroom. The dress hung on its hanger, perfect and unwanted. Without hesitation, Cassidy lifted it off the hanger and folded it carefully over her arm. She picked up the garment bag and walked back into the living room. Marley and Tessa looked up in surprise. "Where are you going with the dress?" Marley asked, her voice rising an octave. "Home," Cassidy said calmly. "But I need to try it on. We need to make sure it fits." "No, you don't." Cassidy walked to the door without another word. Behind her, she could hear Marley scrambling to follow. "Cass, wait. What's wrong? Did I say something?" Cassidy paused at the door and turned back. Marley stood in the living room in her silk robe and curlers, looking genuinely confused. It occurred to Cassidy that her sister probably didn't even remember what she'd just said. The cruelty had been so casual, so automatic, that it hadn't registered as significant. "Nothing's wrong," Cassidy said. "You just won't be wearing this dress to your wedding. But enjoy your thrift store find from Portland." She left Marley standing in the doorway, mouth open. As she carried 6 months of work back to her car, the drive home passed in a blur. She felt strangely calm, almost euphoric. For the first time in her life, she'd walked away from one of Marley's casual betrayals instead of absorbing it in silence. Back home, she hung the dress in her sewing room and stood looking at it for a long time. It really was beautiful. Perfect, even. The kind of dress that could launch a career, get her noticed by the right people, open doors she'd only dreamed of. She thought about the expression on Marley's face when she'd walked out. The confusion, the entitlement, the assumption that Cassidy would eventually come back and apologize for whatever imaginary slight she'd committed. But Cassidy wasn't going back. And she wasn't apologizing. She was going to do something else entirely. She pulled out her laptop and began researching. Wedding venues in Portland. Social media management. Local society columnists. Business licenses for design consultants. BY midnight. She had the beginnings of a plan. Not just revenge that was too simple, too crude. What she was planning was more elegant than that. She was going to give Marley exactly what she deserved. The notification popped up on Cassidy's phone while she was having coffee the next morning. Marley had posted a new photo on social media, herself beaming in a wedding boutique, surrounded by layers of white fabric and designer labels. Found the perfect dress. Portland shopping trip was totally worth it. Hashtag wedding gown, hashtag designer, hashtag dreamskometru, hashtag blessed. Cassidy clicked on the photo, studying the dress her sister had chosen. It was elaborate, covered in crystals and layered with imported lace. The kind of gown that screamed expense rather than elegance. In the comments, someone had asked about the price. Worth every penny, $8,200, but Chase's mom insisted on the best. Hashtag spoiled, hashtag lucky bride. Cassidy set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. $8,200. More than some people made in 3 months. More than Marley had ever spent on anything in her life. She scrolled through the comments, noting the mix of genuine congratulations and barely concealed envy from Marley's friends. Tessa had posted a string of heart eye emojis. Chase's mother had commented, "Only the finest for my future daughter-in-law." But it was the last comment that made Cassidy's lips curve into a cold smile. Someone named Devin Pike had written, "Hope the wedding's cheaper than the dress. Chase owes me money." Cassidy screenshotted the comment before it could be deleted. Her phone rang. Harlan's number. "Dad." Marley called. "She's upset about yesterday. Says you took the dress and won't return her calls." Cassidy walked to her sewing room, where the wedding dress hung like a ghost of wasted effort. She found another dress. Problem solved. She says she wants to apologize. Says there was some kind of misunderstanding. There wasn't. Harlan was quiet for a moment. "What happened, kiddo?" "Nothing that hasn't happened before. I just finally stopped pretending it mattered. You spent months on that dress. And now I'm spending my time on something else. Don't worry about it, Dad. I'm fine." She hung up before he could ask more questions. Harlan meant well, but he'd never understood the dynamic between his daughters. He saw Marley's behavior as thoughtless rather than calculated, and Cassidy's responses as oversensitive rather than justified. Cassidy pulled out her laptop and began researching. First, she looked up the boutique where Marley had bought her dress. Exclusive Bridal Portland. Their website featured gowns starting at $5,000, with most pieces falling into the 8 to 15,000 range. The kind of place that catered to Portland's social elite. Next, she researched Devin Pike. His social media was sparse, but his LinkedIn told an interesting story. Former business partner at Duval Financial Consulting. Current status, independent financial advisor. The partnership had ended 8 months ago. She found a local business journal article about the split. It was carefully worded, full of corporate speak about pursuing different opportunities and mutual agreement. But reading between the lines, it was clear the separation hadn't been amicable. Cassidy made notes in a leather journal she'd bought specifically for this project. Devin Pike's contact information, the address of exclusive Bridal Portland, the names of Chase's family members she could find through social media. By lunchtime, she had a list of 17 people who might be useful to her plan, a T2 o'clock. She drove across town to the Riverside Manor, an elegant Victorian house that had been converted into luxury apartments. She parked in the circular drive and climbed the steps to the front door. Greta Monahan answered on the second knock, dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. At 75, she carried herself like a woman who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Cassidy, dear, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in." Greta's apartment took up the entire second floor of the mansion. The rooms were decorated with antiques and artwork that spoke of old money and careful curation. Everything was perfect, from the fresh flowers on the mantel to the precisely arranged throw pillows on the sofa. "I brought your alterations," Cassidy said, holding up a garment bag. "The jacket needed more work than I originally thought." "You're an absolute lifesaver. I have lunch with the Garden Club board tomorrow, and Helen Morrison always looks so put together. I refuse to be outdone by someone who shops at department stores." Greta led her to the formal living room, where afternoon light streamed through tall windows. She poured tea from a silver service that looked genuinely antique. "How's your sister's wedding coming along? Only a few weeks now, isn't it?" 3 weeks, Cassidy said, accepting the delicate china cup. "She's very excited." "I'm sure she is. I remember being that age, thinking my wedding day would be the most important moment of my life." Greta's smile was wistful. "Of course, that was before I learned that marriage is just the beginning. The real work comes after." They chatted about Greta's alterations for a few minutes before Cassidy steered the conversation where she needed it to go. "Mrs. Monahan, you have connections in Portland society, don't you?" "Some, yes. Why do you ask?" "Marley's marrying into a Portland family. The Duvals. I thought you might know them." Greta's eyebrows rose slightly. "Chase Duval? The one who runs that financial consulting business." "You know him?" "I know of him. His mother, Patricia, moves in some of the same circles I do. She's ambitious, always trying to make connections with the right people." Greta's tone was carefully neutral, but Cassidy caught the implication. "What about Chase himself?" Greta set down her teacup and studied Cassidy's face. "May I ask why you're interested? You seem to be fishing for something specific." Cassidy had prepared for this moment. Greta was sharp, too intelligent to be fooled by casual questions. "I want to make sure my sister knows what she's getting into. There have been some financial concerns." "Ah." Greta nodded as if this explained everything. "Well, I can tell you that there have been whispers. Nothing concrete, you understand, but people talk." His business partnership ended rather abruptly, and there were rumors about questionable investment strategies. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that make people nervous about trusting him with their money. I have a friend who works at the Securities Commission. She mentioned that there had been some inquiries about Duval Financial, though nothing came of them officially." Cassidy felt a spark of excitement but kept her expression neutral. "That's concerning. It might be nothing, but if I were your sister, I'd want to know more before tying my financial future to his. They talked for another 20 minutes before Cassidy gathered the courage to make her real request. Greta had been her client for 2 years, ever since she'd altered a vintage Chanel suit that no one else in town would touch. The work had been intricate, requiring skills that most tailors didn't possess. "Mrs. Monahan, I need to ask you for a favor." "Of course, dear. After the beautiful work you've done for me, I owe you several favors. Do you know anyone in the Portland media? Society columnists, fashion bloggers, that sort of thing?" Greta's eyes sharpened with interest. "I might. What did you have in mind?" Cassidy chose her words carefully. "I've been thinking about expanding my business, getting my work noticed by the right people. Marley's wedding might be a good opportunity for that." "I see." Greta smiled, and there was something calculating in her expression that told Cassidy she understood more than she was letting on. "Well, I do know Rebecca Chen, who writes the society column for Portland Monthly. And there's a young woman, Amy something, who runs a very popular wedding blog. She's always looking for interesting stories. Would you be willing to make some introductions?" "I'd be delighted. In fact, I've been thinking about attending your sister's wedding myself. I don't often get to small-town celebrations anymore, and I do love to see young people starting their lives together." The offer was perfect, exactly what Cassidy had hoped for, but hadn't dared ask. "That would be wonderful. I'm sure Marley would be honored." "Consider it done. I'll reach out to my contacts this week." Cassidy left Greta's apartment feeling like the first piece of her plan had fallen into place. She had connections now and leverage. More importantly, she had an ally who understood the rules of the game she was playing. That evening, Cassidy created a fake social media account under the name Casey Rose and sent a message to Devin Pike. She kept it simple, a question about financial planning services, and a mention that she'd been referred by someone who'd had concerns about her current advisor. He responded within an hour, suggesting they meet for coffee the next day. The cafe Devin had chosen was on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that attracted people who wanted to have conversations without being overheard. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with the tired look of someone who'd been fighting an uphill battle for months. "So you're having problems with your financial advisor?" he asked after they'd ordered. "Something like that." Cassidy leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I saw your comment on my friend's Facebook post about Chase Duvall owing you money." Devin's expression darkened. "Are you a reporter?" "No. I'm his future sister-in-law, and I'm concerned about what my sister is getting into." For a moment, she thought he might get up and leave. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked more tired than angry. "How much do you want to know?" "Everything." Devin pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages until he found what he was looking for. "This is from 6 months ago. Chase promising to buy out my share of the business within 90 days. He showed her the text thread. Chase's messages were full of promises and excuses, dates that came and went without payment, explanations that got more elaborate each time. "How much does he owe you?" $47,000. My half of the business value, plus expenses he agreed to cover during the transition. Cassidy felt her pulse quicken. "Do you have proof of the agreement?" "Signed contracts, email threads, bank records showing my contributions to the business. Everything." His laugh was bitter. "For all the good it's done me. Chase keeps saying the money's coming, that he's just waiting for some big deals to close. But I've seen the client list. The business isn't doing nearly as well as he pretends. Have you considered legal action?" "Can't afford it, and Chase knows that. He's counting on me not being able to fight him in court." Cassidy studied his face, noting the anger and frustration beneath the exhaustion. "What if I told you there might be another way to get your money back?" "What kind of way?" She pulled out her phone and showed him Marley's post about the $8,000 wedding dress. "That's his fiancée. My sister. She's been spending money like she's already married to someone wealthy. Devin studied the photo, his jaw tightening. $8,000 for a dress, while he owes me $47,000. That's about right. What else can you tell me about Chase's finances, his business practices? For the next hour, Devin laid out a detailed picture of Chase's operation. The inflated client reports, the investment strategies that skirted the edge of ethical boundaries, the way he used money from new clients to pay obligations to existing ones. It's not technically illegal, Devin said, but it's not sustainable either. Eventually, he's going to run out of new money to plug the holes. When? Soon. Maybe 6 months, maybe less. He's been scrambling to find new investors, but his reputation is starting to catch up with him. Cassidy made careful notes in her journal. Would you be willing to document all of this? Put together a complete record of his business practices? Why? Because I think you deserve to get your money back. And I think my sister deserves to know what she's marrying into. Devin was quiet for a long moment. You're planning something. I'm planning to give people the information they need to make informed decisions. When? Soon. He nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Documents, records, communications. I want a complete picture of who Chase Duval really is. And in return, you get your money back, and you get to watch him face consequences for his actions. Devin extended his hand across the table. Deal. 2 days later, Cassidy received a package containing copies of every document Devin had mentioned. Bank records, email threads, client contracts, and a detailed timeline of Chase's broken promises. She spread everything across her dining room table and began organizing it into a coherent narrative. The picture that emerged was damning. Chase was running his business like a shell game, moving money around to create the illusion of success while actual profits dwindled. Her phone rang while she was working. An unknown number. Hello. Is this Cassidy Rowe? The voice was young, nervous. Yes. Who's this? This is Lila Carson. I'm Marley's cousin. From her mom's side. Cassidy remembered her. Lila was one of those family members who appeared at holiday gatherings, but never quite seemed to belong. Quiet, awkward, always standing on the edges of conversations. Hi, Lila. What can I do for you? I heard about what happened with the wedding dress. Marley told everyone you had some kind of breakdown and stormed out. Is that what she's saying? Yeah, but I was thinking. I know Marley. I know how she treats people. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. The unexpected sympathy caught Cassidy off guard. Thank you. I'm actually one of her bridesmaids. Not by choice, really. My mom made me say yes because family loyalty and all that. But I hate it. I hate the dress she picked out. I hate the way she talks to all of us like we're her servants. Why are you telling me this? Lila was quiet for a moment. Because I'm tired of watching her get away with treating people badly. And because I thought you might want to know what she's really saying about you. What is she saying? That you're jealous of her success. That you've always been bitter about her being prettier and more popular. That your dress was ugly and she was doing you a favor by not wearing it. The words stung, but they also hardened Cassidy's resolve. Anything else? She's been telling people that you've always been weird about money, that you tried to charge her for the dress even though you offered to make it as a gift. I never asked her for money. I figured, look, I know this might sound crazy, but if you wanted to know what's really going on with the wedding planning, I could keep you informed. I'm around for all the bridesmaid stuff, and Marley tells us everything. Cassidy felt another piece of her plan clicking into place. Why would you do that? Because someone should hold her accountable for once. And because, well, I always liked you. You were nice to me at family gatherings when everyone else ignored me. What kind of information? Everything. Who's coming to the wedding? What they're spending money on? What Chase's family really thinks about everything. Marley doesn't have a filter when she's excited, and she's been talking nonstop about all the drama. I'd appreciate that. Cassidy said carefully. There's something else. Something you should probably know right away. What? The money for the wedding. Chase said his family was paying for everything, but that's not true. Marley asked her dad for a loan. $20,000 from his retirement account. Cassidy's hand tightened on the phone. When? Last week. She told him it was just temporary, that Chase's mother would pay him back as soon as some investment thing came through. But I heard her talking to Chase about it, and they have no plan to pay it back. They're hoping your dad will just let it go because it's for the wedding. The betrayal hit Cassidy like a physical blow. Harlan's retirement money was sacred, the result of 40 years of careful saving and sacrifice. The idea that Marley would steal from him to fund her fantasy wedding was so unconscionable that for a moment Cassidy couldn't speak. Are you sure? She finally managed. I saw the bank transfer receipt. Marley was showing it to Chase like it was some kind of trophy. Thank you for telling me. There's going to be more. Marley's spending money, like she won the lottery, and none of it's really hers. I'll keep you posted on what I hear. After Lila hung up, Cassidy sat staring at her phone for a long time. $20,000. Money her father couldn't afford to lose. Money that represented his security and independence. She thought about calling him, warning him about what Marley was doing. But she knew how that conversation would go. Harlan would make excuses for Marley, would convince himself that she really intended to pay him back, and she couldn't protect him from this. But she could make sure Marley faced consequences for it. She returned to the documents Devin had given her, studying them with new intensity. There had to be something she could use, some leverage that would force Chase to take responsibility for his actions. She found it in an email thread from 4 months ago. Chase had been trying to convince a wealthy widow to invest her entire portfolio with his firm. The sales pitch was full of promises that bordered on fraud-guaranteed returns that were mathematically impossible, investment strategies that didn't actually exist. The widow had declined, but if she hadn't, she would have lost everything. Cassidy photographed the email thread and added it to her growing file. She was building a case, piece by piece, that would destroy Chase's reputation and business. But more than that, she was building a weapon that would give her control over her sister's future. The next morning, Cassidy drove to Portland. She'd made appointments with both of Greta's contacts, Rebecca Chin from Portland Monthly and Amy Williams from the wedding blog. Perfect. Rebecca met her at an upscale cafe in the Pearl District, the kind of place that charged $12 for coffee and expected you to be grateful for the privilege. She was younger than Cassidy had expected, maybe 30, with a sharp, assessing look of someone who'd built her career on knowing which stories were worth telling. So Greta tells me you're a designer, Rebecca said, stirring sugar into her cappuccino. What kind of work do you do? Couture gowns, mostly. Wedding dresses, formal wear. Everything hand-sewn. In Oregon? Yes. I know it's not the typical location for high-end fashion, but that's part of what makes my work unique. Rebecca looked skeptical. The market for couture in small towns is pretty limited. That's why I'm looking to expand. I've been thinking about ways to get my work noticed by a broader audience. And you think your sister's wedding might be an opportunity? Cassidy had prepared for this question. Partially. But more than that, I think there's a story worth telling about the wedding industry and what people are willing to spend on a single day. What do you mean? My sister's wedding is costing more than most people make in a year. The dress alone was $8,000 for a small town wedding that maybe 100 people will attend. Rebecca's interest sharpened. How much total? Close to $50,000 from what I can tell. For someone who works part-time at a dental office and is marrying a man whose business is... Cassidy paused delicately. Let's say questionable. Questionable how? There have been some concerns about his business practices. Former partners who haven't been paid. Clients who've had problems with their investments. Rebecca pulled out her phone and opened the voice recording app. Would you mind if I recorded this? Just for my own notes. I'd prefer not to be quoted directly, but I can put you in touch with people who might be willing to speak on the record. What people? Former business partners, clients who've had problems, people who know the real story behind the fantasy. They talked for another 30 minutes, with Rebecca asking increasingly detailed questions about Chase's business and the wedding expenses. Cassidy provided just enough information to intrigue her without revealing her ultimate plan. This could be an interesting piece, Rebecca said finally. A cautionary tale about wedding spending and financial responsibility. Would you be willing to be interviewed on the record if I decide to move forward? I think that could be arranged. And you'd be okay with me attending the wedding? As a journalist? I can't speak for my sister, but I imagine she'd be flattered by the attention. Rebecca laughed. Most people are, until they see what I actually write. The meeting with Amy Williams was different. She was younger, maybe 25, with the enthusiastic energy of someone who genuinely loved her work. Her blog had over 100,000 followers and was known for featuring both aspirational content and cautionary tales. Greta showed me some photos of your work, Amy said, scrolling through her tablet. It's really beautiful. Very classic, very elegant. Thank you. She mentioned something about a surprise reveal at an upcoming wedding. That sounds intriguing. Cassidy chose her words carefully. There might be an opportunity to showcase some of my work in an unexpected way. I can't say too much yet, but if it works out, it could be quite dramatic. I love drama. Good drama, I mean. Not the bridezilla kind. This would definitely be the good kind. Amy leaned forward eagerly. Can you give me any hints? Let's just say that sometimes the most beautiful gowns aren't the ones people expect to see. They arranged for Amy to follow Cassidy's social media accounts and stay in touch about potential coverage. Amy gave her business cards and contact information for several other bloggers who might be interested in the story. By the time Cassidy drove home, she had commitments from 2 media contacts to cover the wedding in some capacity. They thought they were coming to document a small-town wedding with an interesting financial angle. They had no idea what they were really going to see. That evening, Lila called with more information. The final guest count is 93 people, she said. But Marley's been telling everyone it's 150 because she thinks that sounds more impressive. What else? Chase's mother is flying in tomorrow for the final preparations. Marley's terrified of her. She keeps practicing conversations in the mirror, trying to sound more sophisticated. Has she said anything about the money? She was bragging to the other bridesmaids about how generous your dad is. Said he was so excited about the wedding that he insisted on contributing $20,000. Cassidy closed her eyes, fighting back rage. Anything else? The photographer they hired backed out last week. Something about not receiving the deposit they promised. Marley's scrambling to find a replacement, but everyone good is already booked. Poor planning on her part. She's been calling it vendor drama and blaming everyone except herself. Oh, and there's something weird about the flowers. What about them? The florist says they never received final payment for the arrangements. Marley keeps telling them the money is coming, but it's been 2 weeks. They're threatening to cancel if they don't get paid by Friday. Cassidy made notes in her journal. The financial pressure was building exactly as she'd hoped. Chase's business was failing. The wedding expenses were spiraling out of control, and they were running out of other people's money to spend. Keep me posted, she told Lila. And Lila, thank you for everything. Just promise me one thing. What? When whatever you're planning happens, make sure it's spectacular. Marley deserves to have her world turned upside down for once. Don't worry, Cassidy said, looking at the wedding dress hanging in her sewing room. It will be. The final piece of her plan fell into place 2 days later. Greta called with news that she'd arranged for not just Rebecca and Amy to attend the wedding, but also a photographer from Portland Monthly who specialized in society events. I told them it was a cultural story, Greta explained. Small-town traditions versus big-city expectations. They're quite interested in the contrast. Will they be there as invited guests or press? A bit of both. They'll be discreet, but they'll be there to document whatever happens. Perfect. Cassidy, dear, I hope you know what you're doing. Once this starts, there's no controlling where it goes. I know exactly what I'm doing. Good, because I have a feeling this is going to be quite a show. After she hung up, Cassidy walked to her sewing room and uncovered the wedding dress. In 2 weeks, it would make its debut. Not on Marley, as originally intended, but in a way that would serve a much more important purpose. She ran her fingers along the silk one more time, thinking about the months of work that had gone into every stitch. All that time and effort hadn't been wasted after all. IT had been preparation for this moment. The morning of Marley's wedding dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that made everything look slightly more miserable than it actually was. Cassidy stood at her kitchen window, drinking coffee and watching the rain streak down the glass. Her phone had been buzzing all morning with messages from Lila, providing a real-time update on the chaos unfolding at the wedding venue. Photographer finally showed up, but he's clearly inexperienced. Keeps asking where to plug in his equipment. Marley having meltdown number 3 of the day. Flowers arrived 2 hours late, and half of them are wilted. Florist says they did their best with late payment, but can't guarantee quality. Chase's mother arrived and immediately started criticizing everything. Called the venue quaint in a way that definitely wasn't a compliment. Cassidy replied with supportive messages, playing the role of concerned sister who was sadly unable to attend due to the unfortunate dress incident. She'd crafted her absence, carefully hurt but dignified, disappointed but understanding. At 10 a.m. She loaded the wedding dress into her car and drove to the community center where the ceremony was being held. The parking lot was already full of cars, and she could see people informal were hurrying through the rain toward the building. She parked across the street and called Greta. "I'm here," she said. "Excellent. Rebecca and Amy are already inside, along with the photographer. They're being very discreet, just observing for now. And you?" "I'm putting the finishing touches on my appearance. I must say, this dress is even more stunning than I remembered. You've outdone yourself, dear. Save some of that praise for the cameras." "Oh, don't worry about that. I've been practicing my talking points all week." Cassidy hung up and settled into wait. According to Lila's timeline, the ceremony was supposed to start at 11, but knowing Marley's tendency toward drama, she expected delays. 10:47. Her phone rang. Tessa's name appeared on the screen. "Cassidy, thank God you answered. I need you to come inside right now. We have an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" "It's the dress. Marley's dress. Something's wrong with it. The zipper just broke. Like completely destroyed. She can't wear it." Cassidy felt a spark of satisfaction, but kept her voice carefully neutral. "How did that happen?" "I don't know. She was trying to put it on for the final time, and when she went to zip it up, the whole thing just fell apart. The zipper is completely separated from the fabric. Have you tried safety pins?" "It's beyond that. The zipper pulled out huge chunks of the fabric. There are holes everywhere. It looks like someone attacked it with scissors." Cassidy made appropriate, shocked noises. "That's terrible. What is she going to do?" "That's why I'm calling. She needs the dress you made. I know there was some kind of fight, but this is an emergency. She's crying and hyperventilating, and the guests are already arriving. Can you please bring your dress?" "Tessa, please, Cassidy. I'm begging you. She knows she was awful to you, and she wants to apologize. But right now, she just needs help." Cassidy looked across the street at the community center, where she could see people gathering under umbrellas near the entrance. "I suppose I could bring it over." but I can't promise it will fit properly without alterations. Anything is better than what we have now. How quickly can you get here? 10 minutes. You're a lifesaver. I'll tell Marley you're coming. Cassidy hung up and sat in her car for a moment, savoring the anticipation. Everything was going exactly as planned. She'd spent hours over the past week carefully weakening the stitching on Marley's designer gown zipper, replacing the heavy-duty thread with delicate silk that would snap under pressure. She gathered the wedding dress from her back seat and walked across the street to the community center. The building was buzzing with activity caterers setting up tables, musicians tuning instruments, guests milling around in the lobby. Tessa met her at the door, still in her robe with her hair in curlers. "Oh, thank God you're here. Marley's in the bridal suite. Fair warning, she's not in great shape." The bridal suite was actually just a Sunday school classroom with a folding screen, set up for privacy. Marley sat in front of a makeshift vanity, still in her slip and robe, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The ruined designer gown lay in pieces on a nearby chair, looking like expensive roadkill. "Cass!" Marley leaped up and threw her arms around her sister. "I'm so sorry about everything. I was horrible to you, and I know it. I was just so stressed about the wedding, and I said things I didn't mean." Cassidy stood stiffly in the embrace, not returning it. "What happened to your dress?" "I don't know. It just fell apart when I tried to put it on. The boutique must have done something wrong when they altered it, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're here and you brought your dress." Marley's eyes focused on the garment bag in Cassidy's hands with desperate hunger. "Can I please wear it? I know I don't deserve it after what I said, but I'm begging you. This is my wedding day." Cassidy looked at her sister's tear-stained face, noting the genuine panic beneath the smeared makeup. "I don't know, Marley. You were pretty clear about what you thought of my work." "I was wrong. I was stupid and mean and wrong. Your dress is beautiful. It's everything I should have wanted. You said it looked like something from a thrift store." Marley flinched. "I know. I'm sorry. I was just scared about fitting in with Chase's family, and I said awful things. But I was wrong about everything." "Were you?" "Yes. Please, Cass. I'll do anything. I'll pay you for it. I'll tell everyone how talented you are. I'll never ask you for anything again. Just please let me wear your dress." Cassidy appeared to consider this, letting the silence stretch until Marley looked ready to collapse from anxiety. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I can't." "What?" Marley's voice rose to a near shriek. "What do you mean you can't?" "You said it yourself. It looks like something from a thrift store. I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of Chase's family. But I apologized. I said I was wrong. You said a lot of things, but we both know you didn't mean them." Cassidy's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're not sorry about what you said. You're sorry about the consequences." "That's not true." "Isn't it? If your expensive dress hadn't fallen apart, would you be here begging for my help? Would you have ever apologized for insulting my work?" Marley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. They both knew the answer. "Goodbye, Marley. I hope you figure something out." Cassidy turned toward the door, but Marley grabbed her arm. "Wait, you can't just leave. I'm your sister." "Half-sister," Cassidy corrected, echoing their father's words from months earlier. "And you made your choice when you decided my work wasn't good enough for you." She walked out, leaving Marley sobbing behind her. In the hallway, she passed several bridesmaids who looked confused and panicked. The ceremony was supposed to start in 15 minutes, and everyone could hear Marley's meltdown from inside the bridal suite. Cassidy made her way to the main hall, where guests were beginning to take their seats. She spotted Rebecca Chen near the back, notebook in hand, looking like someone who sensed a story developing. Amy Williams was closer to the front, her phone discreetly positioned to capture video, Chase stood at the altar looking increasingly nervous as the start time came and went without any sign of his bride. His mother, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, kept checking her watch and making disapproving faces at 11:23. The doors at the back of the hall opened with a dramatic flourish. But instead of Marley, Greta Monahan swept in wearing Cassidy's wedding dress. The effect was immediate and stunning. The gown, which had been designed for Marley's slender frame, fit Greta's more mature figure perfectly, the expert tailoring creating elegant lines that flattered her completely. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world, and the dress seemed to transform her from a well-dressed elderly woman into something approaching royalty. Beside her walked Thomas Portland, one of the city's most prominent philanthropists and a man whose name appeared regularly in society columns. He was distinguished, wealthy, and exactly the kind of person who could make or break reputations with a single comment. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as guests turned to stare. Rebecca Chen's pen moved frantically across her notebook. Amy Williams raised her phone and began streaming live to her followers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Greta announced in her carrying voice, "I do hope you'll forgive the interruption, but I simply had to show off this magnificent creation by our local treasure, Cassidy Rowe." She spun slowly, letting the dress catch the light. The hand-sewn beadwork sparkled. The silk flowed like water, and every perfect detail was visible to the growing crowd of onlookers. "I've worn gowns by the finest designers in New York and Paris," Greta continued, "but I've never seen craftsmanship quite like this. Cassidy is an artist, and this dress is her masterpiece." Thomas Portland nodded in agreement. "Extraordinary work. I haven't seen quality like this outside of the European fashion houses." Cameras flashed as people pulled out phones to capture the moment. Amy's live stream was getting dozens of comments from followers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Chase looked bewildered, clearly having no idea who these people were or why they were disrupting his wedding. His mother, however, had recognized Thomas Portland immediately and was staring with the kind of horror reserved for social catastrophes. To the back of the hall. The bridal suite door burst open. Marley emerged wearing a wrinkled backup dress that looked like it had been hastily assembled from spare fabric. It was clearly a bridesmaid's dress, altered in desperation with safety pins and hope. She stumbled down the aisle, trying to salvage some dignity from the disaster, but the damage was done. Every eye in the room was on Greta and the magnificent gown she wore, and Marley looked like an afterthought at her own wedding. The ceremony proceeded in awkward, stilted fashion. The officiant, clearly flustered by the delay and disruption, rushed through the vows. Chase's responses were mechanical, distracted by the ongoing murmur of conversation about the dress. Marley's voice shook with suppressed tears and rage. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was perfunctory, almost businesslike. There was scattered applause, but most of the guests were still talking about Greta's dramatic entrance. During the reception, the focus remained stubbornly on anyone except the bride and groom. Greta held court near the cake table, surrounded by admirers who wanted to know more about the dress and its creator. Thomas Portland was overheard telling several people that he was planning to commission Cassidy for his daughter's upcoming wedding. Rebecca Chun interviewed multiple guests about their reactions to the gown, gathering quotes about Cassidy's talent and the striking contrast between the professional craftsmanship of her work and the obvious problems with the bride's hastily assembled outfit. Amy Williams' live stream had attracted over 10,000 viewers by the end of the evening, with comments pouring in from fashion bloggers and potential clients who wanted to know more about this mysterious Oregon designer. Marley spent most of the reception in the bathroom, crying and trying to fix her makeup. When she did appear, she looked haggard and defeated, overshadowed completely by the drama she had inadvertently created. Cassidy watched the festivities from a corner table, sipping champagne and taking careful notes in her journal. Everything was proceeding exactly as she'd planned, but the best part was still to come. At 9 p.m., during the cake cutting, her phone buzzed with a message from Devin Pike. "Package delivered." While guests focused on the symbolic moment of Marley and Chase feeding each other cake, Devin was uploading a complete dossier of Chase's business practices to multiple financial websites and social media platforms. Bank records, email threads, client complaints, and a detailed timeline of broken promises and questionable investments. The documents painted a picture of a man who ran his business like a Ponzi scheme, using new investments to cover old debts while skimming profits for personal expenses. The evidence was devastating and comprehensive. By 10 p.m., the first articles were appearing online. Financial bloggers picked up the story, linking it to broader concerns about investment fraud and regulatory oversight. Chase's business phone began ringing with calls from worried clients and regulatory agencies. Meanwhile, Amy Williams' wedding coverage had gone viral. Her hashtag Casado Artistry was trending on multiple platforms, with fashion influencers sharing screenshots of the wedding dress and demanding to know more about the designer. Cassidy received 17 emails that night from potential clients, including 3 celebrity stylists and a representative from a major fashion magazine. 2 weeks after the wedding, Chase's business officially collapsed. The State Securities Commission launched a formal investigation, and his remaining clients filed a class action lawsuit for investment fraud. He was forced to declare bankruptcy, and his assets were frozen pending the legal proceedings. Marley's expensive wedding purchases paid for with borrowed money and questionable financial instruments became her responsibility alone. The vendors who hadn't been fully paid began calling daily, demanding payment for services already rendered. She tried to return to Harlan for more money, but he had finally learned the truth about the $20,000 loan from Lila, who couldn't keep the secret any longer. The confrontation was brief and final. "You stole from me," he told Marley, his voice quiet with disappointment. "You lied to my face and stole money I need for my retirement. It was just a loan, Dad. We were going to pay you back." "With what money? Your husband's business is gone. You don't have a job. You have no plan except to keep taking from other people. I'm your daughter." "Cassidy is my daughter. You're just someone who shares some of my DNA." Harlan changed his banking information and his will, cutting Marley off completely. She was left to face the mounting debts with no family support and a husband whose reputation was destroyed. Meanwhile, Cassidy's career exploded. The viral wedding coverage led to a feature article in Portland Monthly, which led to inquiries from fashion buyers in Seattle and San Francisco. Within a month, she had more work than she could handle. 6 months later, she opened her own atelier in Portland's fashionable Pearl District. The space was elegant but understated, with white walls, polished concrete floors, and carefully curated displays of her work. She was fitting a gown for a tech executive's daughter when Greta Monahan stopped by for a visit. "Still no regrets?" Greta asked, admiring the half-finished dress on the fitting form. Cassidy smiled without looking up from her work. "Regrets are for people who lose." "And what did you win, exactly?" "Everything I wanted. A successful business, recognition for my work, and the satisfaction of knowing that actions have consequences." "What about your sister?" "What about her?" "Don't you feel sorry for her at all?" Cassidy finally looked up, her needle paused mid-stitch. Marley made her choices. She chose to be cruel, to take credit for other people's work, to lie and steal and manipulate. She chose to treat me like I was worthless. And now she knows what it feels like to lose everything. I consider that a valuable education. Greta nodded approvingly. "You're a formidable woman, Cassidy Rowe. Remind me never to cross you." "You don't have to worry about that," Cassidy said, returning to her stitching. "I only go after people who deserve it." Through the large windows of her atelier, she could see the Portland skyline stretching toward the mountains. It was a view she'd dreamed of having someday, back when she was working in her cramped sewing room in her father's house, absorbing one casual cruelty after another. The tech executive's daughter would wear this dress to her engagement party, where it would be photographed by society columnists and fashion bloggers. Orders would follow, as they always did now. Her calendar was booked solid for the next 18 months. She thought briefly about Marley, probably at that moment fielding calls from creditors or searching job listings for positions that would never pay enough to cover her debts. The thought didn't make her happy exactly, but it satisfied something deep and cold in her chest. Justice, she had learned, was something you had to create for yourself. And when you did it right, it lasted forever. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, but inside her warm, successful atelier, Cassidy Rowe continued her work, one perfect stitch at a time.